this lesson, we will explore the big ideas that are embedded in self-regulation. When considering self-regulation, we need to ask, is the learning activity long-term? Do students plan and assess their own work? Do students revise their work based on feedback? Learning activities that give students the opportunity to acquire self-regulation skills must last long enough for students to have the opportunity to plan their work over time. The learning activities must also present clear learning goals and success criteria that students can use to plan and monitor their own work. Educators can foster self-regulation skills by giving students working in groups responsibility for deciding who will do what and on what schedule. In the most successful learning activities, students receive feedback that is supportive of their progress towards clear learning goals, and they have the opportunity to act on that feedback in order to improve their work before it is considered final. Self-regulation involves a range of skills which become increasingly sophisticated as they develop over time. At the beginning of a semester, students who are new to self-regulation may need more explicit guidance, but over time, it can be a goal for educators to give students progressively more responsibility for their own learning. A learning activity is considered long-term if students work in it for a substantive period of time. If the learning activity is completed within a single class period, there is no time for students to plan the process of their work, nor to improve their work over multiple drafts. Length of time is a basic prerequisite for students' opportunity for self-regulation. Think about these situations and consider if the learning activity can be considered long-term or not. Students keep a journal about their nutrition over the course of a week. What about this learning activity? Is it long-term? Students document what they ate on 2 different days. Learning goals define what is to be learned in this activity and how these goals fit with prior and future learning. Success criteria are the factors that will be considered to determine whether the learning goals have been met. They provide evidence of student progress and success in the learning activity. When students have learning goals and associated success criteria in advance of completing their work, it is possible for them to examine the progress and quality of their own work as they do it. The educator might provide the learning goals and the associated success criteria of a learning activity to students. Or the class might negotiate the learning goals and success criteria together in order to foster more student ownership of the learning activity. An understanding of these factors early in the learning activity is another important prerequisite for students' opportunity for self-regulation. When students plan their own work, they make decisions about the schedule and the steps they will follow to accomplish the task. Planning their own work may involve deciding how students break down a complex task into smaller subtasks or choose the tools they will use. Deciding when students create a schedule for their work and setting interim deadlines. Deciding who. A group of students determine how to divide work among themselves. Deciding where. Students decide what pieces of the work will be done inside or outside of the school building or the school day. If a task is long-term, but students are given detailed instructions and timelines, they do not have the opportunity to plan their own work. Students making decisions about small aspects of tasks does not qualify as planning their own work. Think about these situations and consider if the students are planning their own work. Over 2 weeks, students work in groups to research and debate climate change with their classmates. Students decide who will research which aspects of the topic and who will speak at different points in the debate. Are students planning their own work in this situation? Over 2 weeks, students work in groups to research and debate climate change with their classmates. The educator assigns specific roles to each student. What about this situation? Over 2 weeks, students work in groups to research and debate climate change with their classmates. Students make their own deadlines for completing their research, writing their speeches, and practicing them. Are the students planning their own work in this case? Over 2 weeks, students work in groups to research and debate climate change with their classmates. Students follow the steps and timeline provided by the educator. Feedback may come from the educator or from peers. Students might also have the opportunity to revise their work based on their own deliberate process of self-reflection. Feedback can be one of the most significant influences on improving learning. Effective feedback helps students to address the gap between current performance and performance goals. It is more than simple praise. Comments such as good job or great work do little to help the student understand what constitutes great work. Effective feedback tells the student specifically what he or she is doing well and offers specific guidance to help move their learning forward. Is directly connected to the learning goals and success criteria, helps the student be more aware of progress along a learning path, and leads to reflection and planning of next steps. Think about the following scenarios and consider if the students have the opportunity to revise work based on feedback. Students learn about environmental conservation and create games in Kazoo where players make decisions to preserve the environment. After developing a beta version of their game, students trade games with a partner and give each other feedback to improve their games before turning them in. Do these students have the opportunity to revise work based on feedback? Students learn about environmental conservation and create games in Kazoo where players make decisions to preserve the environment. Students post the first version of their games for classmates to play, without opportunities to receive or implement feedback. In this activity, do these students have the opportunity to revise work based on feedback? Students create PowerPoint presentations about a topic in world history. Students do practice presentations, receive feedback from their educator and peers, and revise their presentation based on feedback before doing a final presentation. What about this activity? Students create PowerPoint presentations about a topic in world history. Students do their final presentation without any opportunity for practice, feedback, or revision. Do the students in this activity have the opportunity to revise work based on feedback? Students write persuasive essays that will be assessed according to a rubric that the educator shared with the students at the beginning of the learning activity. Students use the rubric to reflect on their own essay drafts and make revisions. Finally, do these students have the opportunity to revise work based on feedback? Students write persuasive essays that will be assessed according to a rubric that the educator shared with students at the beginning of the learning activity. Students use the rubric only after getting back their graded essays to see why the educator gave them a certain grade. Now that you've been introduced to the big ideas in self-regulation, we will examine the self-regulation rubric and decision tree in the next lesson.